Hey folks, on this week's Soft Plastics 101, we're going to talk about the silver ghost, the Mulloway, the Jewfish, as it's known around the country. A lot of different names for a lot of different locations where people find them. The thing with Jewfish is you can find them in a lot of different locations, and so you can see I've got a big stack of plastics laid out here, and that's just to have a look at some of those smaller natural systems that hold a lot of school Mulloway, our larger river and estuary systems, where we can target some larger Mulloway and Jewfish, and then also they're available on the beach, rock fishing, and even offshore. So we need some larger plastics again when we take on that side of things. So let's start off in our smaller systems. So down south, a lot of the guys will chase Mulloway, and they're up to around that 60 centimetre size. School Jewfish, readily available in larger numbers, but you don't often get as big a fish at times. So for those that specifically target big fish, they may be throwing larger plastics, but the other guys are often targeting numbers, and they're throwing basically what you'd throw if you're chasing brim. So those guys will be targeting brim, estuary perch, and also school Mulloway. The areas they target, often natural structure, so rocky edges, mud banks, drop-offs, deeper holes, and primarily with Mulloway, if you can find a lot of bait, find the bait, and they're being an apex predator, that's where the Mulloway will be. They'll be hunting that bait. So keep an eye out for bait on your sounder, keep an eye out for bait movement around your nervous water. So a couple of smaller plastics for our school Mulloway, 2.5 inch grubs, super popular, along with the 2.5 inch slim swims. And we will run those on 1/16, 1/12, 1/8 jig heads. So nice light jig heads because you're just floating them down naturally for those brim, estuary perch, and also those Mulloway or Jewfish in that system as well. So a size 1 Headlocks HD jig head is good on the 2.5 inch grubs, and a size 10 is a good starting point on that slim swims. And they're both effective on those school Jewies. You'll see a lot of photos of fish caught on those. As you move up, looking for larger plastics, might be bigger bait in the system, slightly bigger system, or bigger fish available there. And that's where we'll up our plastic size a little bit. So we might go to the 3.5 inch grubs, 3.75 inch streaks, or the 3 inch slim swims, the bigger brother of that little 2.5 inch slim swims. And again, those guys, you might be fishing them on those light heads, but you'll also start to step up a little bit to that 1/6 or that 1/4 ounce jig head as you get into a bit deeper water and a bit larger plastic to get down there to the fish. So those guys will generally fish around about a 2.0 jig head in those. And if you're fishing a 2.0 Headlocks HD jig head, that's a good strong hook on there. So even if you do come across a big Mulloway on those plastics, you're still a fair chance of stopping that fish. So that's as we step up in those natural systems, rivers, estuaries, and we start to get a little bit bigger system, bigger fish, bigger bait. And then we come to our estuary and river fishing, and I've got a ton of plastics laid out here for river and estuary fishing. And that's just because so many of these plastics are effective, and if you talk to a bunch of different Mulloway anglers, they'll tell you, oh, my favourite is this, my favourite is this, my favourite is this. So they will vary a lot. So you're pretty well a good chance of catching a fish on either of these, any of these plackies here. The key thing is, again, we want to find that bait. A sounder is awesome in your larger river and estuaries because you can find Mulloway on the sounder, you can find bait on the sounder, and that allows you to target those fish specifically. However, if you don't have a sounder, you can still look for areas of structure that you know hold bait, like rock walls, bridges. If you're night fishing, bridges with lights are good. Also, deeper drop-offs and edges, rubbly, reefy sort of patches in the system as well. All of those areas are a chance of holding a Mulloway. And a lot of the time, prime time to target them is around the turn of your tides when you've got that slack water. The Mulloway, some say, is a bit of a lazy predator at times, so they can just school up and hold in the current and sort of rotate and take turn at holding the lead in the current, so they're not burning as much energy, and as soon as the current drops off a bit, they get out and feed. And also you'll find areas with deeper water and faster run, if you've got an area in close proximity to that holds bait, like a flat or a drain, quite a deep drain, those sorts of areas where the Mulloway can get out of the current and go and target those bait fish are also really, really effective areas to target back eddies, drains, breaks in the current. So a few plastics here that are extremely effective. 3 inch minnows and 4 inch streaks curly tails both have accounted for some quality Mulloway. 3 inch minnows, one of my favourite for sure, very versatile plastic that appeals to a lot of different species. You can step up from those a bit to our 4-inch diesel minnows, another paddle tail that's very effective on Mulloway, and also the 4-inch swimmers with that big wide flat tail that allows you to slow the presentation down as well if you do want to fish a bit slower for those Mulloway. 5-inch sizing. So that plastic there, it's fairly large plastic, but its tail folds away, so you can see there's not really that much there. Same with our 5-inch streaks curly tails, the tail folds away. So that's a bite-sized snack for flathead and other species as well, but a good Mulloway plastic, both of those. 5-inch streaks curly tails and a 5-inch centre jerk shads. 5-inch centre jerk shads is a go-to for a lot of people on the Mulloway because you can fish it with a lot of different retrieves. You can fish it aggressively, you can fish it more subtly, and also without that tail action, it'll get down nice and quick to those fish that you're targeting. Get down there to the bait, get down there to the fish, especially if there's a bit of current in the area as well. So that's the 5-inch centre jerk shads. And lastly, if you've got lots of prawns in the system, that easy shrimps, 3.5-inch easy shrimps is an excellent prawn imitation that you can also use to chase Mulloway when those prawns are skipping around. So you might be right up on the shallow flats on the edge of the mangroves on a high tide, flicking them around where the fish are moving up and feeding on prawns, or you may be back on the edge of a rock wall or around a bridge where there's a lot of prawns and that in the area as well. So another effective plastic. Colour-wise, if you don't know where to start, pearl is a great all-rounder in all different watercolours. So a pearl or a lighter coloured bait fish. We sometimes throw a bit of a darker profile if the water's a bit dirtier. We need a bit more silhouette in that water, and then a fluoro colour as well. So like I've said in the past, a light natural colour, a darker colour, and then a fluoro colour pretty much has you covered for whatever you come across in terms of water clarity and sediment in the water and the light of the day and those sorts of things. So there you go, there's a few for the estuary and river systems that you'll be fishing for Mulloway. Jighead wise, in our kit, I generally start around about an 1/8 or a 1/6 for those real shallow where the fish are up on the flats. Otherwise, I'm primarily on a 1/4, 3/8 and a 1/2 ounce, depending on the water depth and the amount of current that we're fishing. Okay, what about if we go and chase Mulloway off the rocks or in the surf? Generally, surf and rock fishing, you've got water movement, you've got foam, you need that fish to find the soft plastics. So we'll often upsize. So we can carry over our larger plastics from the river and estuary fishing. We can carry over our 5-inch streaks curly tails, 5-inch centre jerk shads, our 4-inch swimmers, but we'll also step up to a 6-inch swimmers a lot of the time. So that 6-inch swimmers is just like a big mullet, school of mullet in the surf. So that's a good profile for larger Mulloway fishing, surf and rock. And also 9-inch grubs is another, lots of profile in that plastic, lots of movement. And our 7-inch centre jerk shad. So they're 3 good plastics. A lot of guys even use the 8-inch Streaks XL, the larger version in that jerk shads again, when they're targeting big dewies around seaway mouths, river mouths, deeper water, lots of current, that sort of thing. So there are a few good plastics when you get into that, wanting a bigger profile, bigger cast, bigger head weight to get out there and target dewies in the gutters and when you're fishing the rocks. When you are targeting dewies in areas like, say, rock fishing, good thing to look for rock fishing. If there's bait around, again, that'll help attract the fish. Otherwise, you're looking for sort of a bommy off the rocks. If you've got the rocks and you've got a bommy out from the rocks and there's water between you and the bommy, especially if it's a foamy gutter with an entry and an exit, that's a great place to target Mulloway off the rocks. Also, if you've got a bit of a break in the rock face, so you've got a bit of a hole formed with foamy water, another great place to target Mulloway. And the other is rock platforms at the end of beaches. So if you've got a big long beach with a rock platform going out from it, that'll allow you to make casts into the back end of that deep gutter and fish for the Mulloway in that end of those deep gutters as well. Beach fishing, we generally look for a gutter that has an opening so the fish can easily move in and out of the gutter, and a bit of deep water close into the bank so that it can hold reasonable sized fish. When we're throwing these larger plastics, of course, we up our jig head size. So weight wise, off the rocks you may still start at a 1/4 if you're fishing those close in foam and that sort of thing, but we'll generally go 1/4, 3/8, 5/8, 3/4 ounce, 1/2 ounce, 1 ounce. So anywhere between a 1/4 and an ounce being about the heavier weight that we'll generally throw. And that allows you a long cast. In terms of hook size, we'll generally go a 6/0 or a 7/0 in that 6-inch swimmers, Same again in that grubs, and then a 7.0 in that 7-inch centre jerk shads, or even an 8.0 if you're chasing big fish. So there you go, that's a bit of a guide in terms of throwing them off the rocks or beach fishing for mulloway. I generally scent up as well. It's funny when you're fishing for mulloway, it can be a hop, boom, aggressive strike. They can be feeding aggressively. It can be a subtle tap, and then the hook set. So I still scent up on the mulloway. Mullet, inshore salt water, sardine pilchard, bloody tuna, all good starting points when you're chasing those mulloway. So there you go. We've got our small stuff covered in those tight systems where you get a lot of school jewies. We've got our river and estuary sorted, and we're all right to go on the rocks and the beach. If I could only have 2 plastics for chasing a jewie, I'd have to go my favourite 3-inch minnows. It's an awesome paddle tail bait, great bite-sized profile, mullet, whiting, you know, whatever those mulloway are feeding on. And I'd probably go a 5-inch centre jerk shads as well, because that allows me to fish the estuary for larger fish, right through to throwing off the rocks, right through to casting off the beach, and even those offshore reefy and rubble patches that attract jewfish as well. Head-wise, I'd probably go a 1/4 or 3/8 3/0 for my estuary work, and then maybe go a 1/2 ounce 5/0 on this one as a versatile sort of presentation for throwing in those other locations. There you go, the Silver Ghost, the mighty mulloway. Hope that helps you go and find one yourself. All the best.